Yeah, it's coming. I was afraid that was going to take the threads with it. That plate can come off. I do want those 3 screws out of the tripod socket, so it's time to get out the hammer. Okay. Hold your breath. 1, 2, 3. It's their tripod socket. There's the little disc that goes underneath it. Let's see what we've got here. I'll zoom you in a bit. Just collapse that front. Okay, so our film advance shaft has a bar running through it at the base. That means it will reset the rewind button in 2 positions. Later cameras had a plate on the bottom with 4 arms on it. But this is a fairly early example. If I hold back that rewind button, can we get this thing out? Before it's corroded in. Let's see, get that rewind catch out of the way first, I think. Yeah, the screw is undoing. The spring is entirely collapsed. It's fairly useless. I think we have to find a replacement for that. There's the lever. Now, can we get this thing loose? Yep. It'll allow me to get the take-up spool and bush out of there. I want that rewind button off. This is all very crunchy sounding. That can only be rubbish in at the top. So I'll need the correct pliers for this. Oh, it's unscrewing. That's good. These buttons are only chrome brass. They're inclined to shear off at the base there if they are forced to move when they don't want to. That washer looks a bit scungy. There's a single screw here that drives the sprocket from the sprocket shaft, so we'll get that out. Remove the shaft and the sprocket. It's starting to look a bit stripped down now. Okay, well, the fighting hasn't ended. There are 4 screws that hold the struts in place, one at the top, one in the equivalent position at the bottom. And this will probably need to be encouraged with the hammer. Yeah. So I'll just give this a little tap. That's it. Usually it's the head. It's the friction of the head or the corrosion of the head into the body that stops those screws from turning rather than the thread. I've got two inside the body to take out. I'm going to knock this hinge pin out and remove the back completely. Oh, that's pretty reluctant. Oh, it's not doing that punch any good. See if I can square that up a bit before I fold the thing over completely. That's better. Right, it's on the move. That doesn't mean it's enthusiastic to come out. I'll find a better pair of pliers. That's what's that I sent flying. Nothing important, I hope. That is really reluctant to come out. Okay, it's out. Here's our hinge pin, the door and the body. I'll put the door aside for the moment and the hinge pin. And the body here. Right, I've got two screws to get out, loosen in the film cassette chamber here. They hold this end of the strut mechanism in place. They will probably need the hammer treatment, but we'll find out. Yeah, they certainly do. Back shortly. They are loose, they just required a gentle tap with the hammer to encourage them. Now the struts can come out. Looking at the state of these, there's a fair bit of sand in here, a little bit of rust, nothing too frightening. And what state are they in? Fairly good. They're quite not shaped unusually. Here is the transfer shaft that takes the action from the cocking rack through to the shutter. Here's the little plate that holds that in place, and there's a washer that serves as a spacer at the base of the camera in the same position. Here's the return spring for the shutter release. It doesn't look too bad, I think that'll be fine. Okay, so that's the camera body pretty much stripped. I've got to get this leather off. This here is my first problem, getting the leather off at this point. I'll zoom out a bit, you're seeing none of this. Okay, it's off in one piece. And the last thing I really want off is the leather from the base of the cam here. I'm going to have to put a new scalpel blade on because I want to cut extremely neatly round that boss. If we can get the old blade off without cutting my fingers off and get the new blade on. This gear here is what transfers the action from the cocking rack to that shaft that comes through. It's just an idler, but it's pretty dirty and grubby and obviously doesn't move smoothly. Alright, so I want to cut around that boss there. Let's put a little drop of naphtha on there, that'll help me slide my scalpel around it easily, I hope, or more easily. I'm making a series of plunge cuts with the very tip of my scalpel. This leather is very dry and hard. If I'm having any luck. Yeah, that's working. Right, well, I'll just continue on. Cutting around this leather until I can lift it off. Shouldn't take long. Well, that leather's off. That's fine. So I've got the leather off the camera body. I'm looking closely at the state of the bellows in case the bellows are coming away from the casting. Given the level of corrosion in this camera, that's always a possibility. Actually, they appear to be quite well stuck. I don't think I've got any problems there. Alright, well, I've got this place into a filthy mess. I'll get these pieces away into the ultrasonic cleaner. I'll start cleaning up the body and getting other stuff ready for reassembly. Let's try getting some of this corrosion off here. Now that's happened, it's completely undermined the adhesive. So that there was nothing gluing the leatherettes in place anymore. You can just see a trace of adhesive at this point. Otherwise it had completely come away from the body. I'm just using the back edge of my scalpel here to scrape that rubbish off. It appears to be worse at this end of the camera. And what would I attribute this corrosion to? Well, that's difficult to say. Typically, there are two causes of serious corrosion on cameras. One is if the camera's been a swimmer, where it's been in the water. To a lesser extent, cameras that have been left out in the rain. But one thing that will kill them in the long run is poor long-term storage. So if the camera has been consigned to a cold, damp shed, for years and years, or in this case probably for decades and decades, that'll certainly do it. Worse if the camera has been left in a leather case, because the leather case acts as a natural sponge, and any moisture in the air, it'll absorb it and it'll hold it there. Continuously stopping the camera from ever fully drying out. Now here there's patches of adhesive still stuck to the base of the camera. but that adhesive is old and crunchy anyway. Now, if you were planning on restoring a camera like this and you're really intent on doing a thorough job of it, all of these discoloured edges you would need to buff those back to shiny, and then you would want to coat them with a clear lacquer to prevent future corrosion. It's natural for aluminium to oxidise and develop an oxide coating, and that's protective. It stops the aluminium from corroding away any further typically. And that's what you'd get if it had been stored somewhere relatively dry. There's less of a problem at the top of the camera because there wasn't the leather at that point to cause the corrosion to continue. Corrosion you see around these top edges are typically where is from dirt and anything spilt on the camera, runs down in between the edge here and the recess in the body and causes just a build up of dirt and rubbish. Alright, that's looking a bit better. Now this gear here, the teeth here are there's a bit of rubbish in there. I'm just going to use the tip of the tweezers to sweep through those teeth and lift that out. It's mostly impacted dirt, a little bit of impacted corrosion product, and possibly even dried out lubricants. But the rubbish gets impacted into the roots of the teeth and will stop the teeth from rolling over each other smoothly. I'm just loosening up this impacted rubbish. Then I'll clean this with naphtha. Have a look at the body. It's a bit dusty looking. The film rails here, the film guides, they need to be nice and smooth and clean, and they appear pretty good. Here I'm just using a stiff paintbrush to move any dust or loose stuff. That appears quite good. And of course on this side we've got the same. That's mostly a build-up of dust in there. Now the door was very reluctant to open when I started, so I'm not sure what's behind that. Certainly the level of corrosion around this catch is probably something to do with it. So that does move freely enough. I'm just going to clean all these components, flush out this little wheel at the top with naphtha until that revolves smoothly. I think it's just impacted dirt and perhaps a little bit of corrosion in there causing that to be stiff. But otherwise that should clean up well. However, you can see the mess I'm in here. Where's that leather? Let's have a look at that. There's the leather from the camera base. The white stuff is corrosion product from the camera body. The black is the original adhesive we're seeing there. And I just want all the lumps and bumps off this. There's a little bit of green corrosion visible at that point. Now that's where it was over the heads of the screws. Or is it the rivets? At that point it's probably here, this rivet head here, which is the nickel plated brass rivet. There's a pair of them that hold the spring in. It pushes the front catch back to its rest position. Now the old adhesive is fairly brittle, but it's also got a good grip on the leather. So I just want the worst of it off. This you can hold that in the light. You can see these lumps and bumps, these warts. I would have to soak this leather, I think, in some hot water to get them to come back. That's where corrosion's built up under the leather and it's stretched it out. And then over time the leather is hardened into that position. It's not going to go back where it came from easily or at all. If I remove more of the old adhesive from here, I'm sort of chipping that away. That'll allow the moisture to soak in better when I soften this leather up. Alright, well at least I've got the worst lumps and bumps off that. About these pieces in the front. Again, it's the same thing. The white stuff you see is the corrosion products. It's an aluminium salt of some sort. Could be the oxide. And the leather is quite stiff. It's also been free from the surface for quite a while. It's peeled back as the adhesive's given way, but the leather's hardened into that position so that it is probably going to be reluctant to fit back neatly in place. The corners are going to want to lift up. And here's the other side. Likewise, the corners are a bit lifted up on this too. But that brings us to this, the camera back. There's a lot of corrosion under it, but I'm not sure whether this will lift off or not. The leather's very hard and dry. This corrosion on the door's not pretty, is it? That's fairly well etched into that aluminium there. The level of corrosion is much the same as it was on the film advance knob. That's so bad I wouldn't be surprised if that was actually perforated.